Chapter 2. Oh, the eternal dream, the dream beyond dreams. What happens when the dream no longer ends upon waking? The unconscious whispers that life itself is a dreamer tapestry woven from archetypes, memories, longings, and mysteries that extend beyond the individual. Your nights are filled with dreams of symbols and journeys. Your days, too, are shaped by inner forces, myths, and images between waking and sleeping. There is no hard border, only a veil. The eternal dream is existence itself. Jung's final vision, near the end of his life, dreamt of standing at the edge of eternity. He saw a temple, vast and radiant, belonging to no single culture, but to all of humanity. Inside, he felt the presence of all who had lived and all who would live. He described it not as death, but as completion. For Jung, the eternal dream is the union of the conscious and unconscious, of life and death, of time and timelessness, the archetype of eternity in myths and visions across cultures. The Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, symbolizes eternal return. The wheel of Dharma in Buddhism turns endlessly, life and death in perpetual cycle. The river of time in Heraclitus' vision flows without beginning or end. The Garden of Paradise in Abrahamic faiths represents eternal dwelling beyond time. All point to the same truth. Our lives are threads in a dream that never ends. The human legacy. Eternal dream is not only spiritual, it is also human. Every thought, invention, and work of art becomes part of the collective dream. Shakespeare, Rumi, Einstein, Gandhi, Mandela, though their bodies ended, their visions continue to dream through us. When you love, create, teach, or inspire, you enter the eternal dream, leaving behind echoes that ripple forever. The unconscious reveals you are both a dreamer and part of the dream. Cinematic depth. Imagine you are standing on a shore, watching waves crash endlessly. One wave rises, it is your life, full of struggle, beauty, sorrow, joy. It crests, breaks, and returns to the ocean. But the ocean does not end. Waves rise again. Endlessly you realize you were never just a single wave, you were always the ocean. Mystics and philosophers on the eternal dream plateau spoke of the soul's immortality, existing beyond the shadows of the cave. Rumi, try to accept the changing seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons passing over the fields. For your soul is a guest house, and eternity is its true home. Jung insisted that the unconscious is not bound by time, that it reaches into the eternal patterns of existence. The eternal dream in you every night. When you sleep, you descend into dreams that connect you with ancestors, archetypes, and future generations. You rehearse, resolve, and renew the eternal dramas of humanity. You participate in the cosmic play of existence. Every dream you dream is part of a greater dream, the dream of humanity, the dream of the cosmos, the dream of eternity itself, the gift of the eternal dream. The unconscious, at the end of its teaching, whispers, death is not the end, it is awakening into a wider dream. Life is not meaningless. It is a chapter in the eternal narrative. You are not alone. You are part of a dream shared by all who came before and all who will come after, closing the journey from pain to hope, from exile to homecoming, from mortality to eternity. This journey has carried us through the full cycle of existence. The final lesson of the unconscious is simple, profound, eternal. Life is a dream. Dream it well. Chapter 19. The Soul's Homecoming, the Dream of Returning Home. Many dreams, perhaps the most powerful, carry the feeling of going home. You walk toward a childhood house. You find yourself in a familiar village, though its streets are glowing with strange light. You step into a room filled with warmth, laughter, or silence that feels eternal. The unconscious whispers, "You are returning." Jung's view of homecoming. For Jung, the archetype of home is not just a house or family, is the self, the center of the psyche where conscious and unconscious unite. Dreams of homecoming symbolize integration. To return home is to find peace between shadow and light, between sorrow and joy, between time and eternity. The soul longs not for escape, but for wholeness. Spiritual and cultural echoes of home in Islam. The Quran speaks of the soul's return to God. Indeed, we belong to Allah, and to Him we shall return. In Christianity, heaven is often described as a banquet, a homecoming to the Father's house. In Hinduism, the Atman returns to Brahman, the eternal source. In Greek myth, Odysseus' journey is the archetype of the return after war, temptation and trial. The longing is for Ithaca, for home. Every culture encodes the truth. The deepest human desire is to go home. Dream symbols of homecoming. Houses, room representing a part of your psyche, explored and reclaimed. Doors opening, transitions into deeper states of being. The embrace of loved ones, the psyche's way of showing reconciliation with the past. Journeys ending at sunrise. Completion. Arrival. Fulfillment. Such dreams remind us that beneath every struggle lies the yearning to return. Cinematic depth. Picture this dream. You walk a long road, weary, carrying the weight of years. Suddenly, on the horizon, a light glows. You approach, and it is a house not of wood or stone, but of light. Inside, faces wait for you. Ancestors, loved ones, even forgotten parts of yourself. You step in, and you are not a wanderer anymore. You are home. The unconscious whispers, you were never lost. You were always on your way here. The collective homecoming. Humanity itself longs for a collective homecoming. Peace among nations, reconciliation of history, unity of spirit. Wars, exiles, migrations, all are outer mirrors of the inner exile. The soul's longing for its origin. When enough individuals return inwardly, societies too can return to their center. Philosophical and mystical insights. Heidegger. To exist is to dwell, to find home in being itself. You am I. I am so small, I can barely be seen. How can this great love be inside me? Look at your eyes, they are small, but they see enormous things. His poetry reminds us that the soul's home is in love. The journey of individuation is nothing but a homecoming, discovering that the treasure you sought outside was already within. The gift of homecoming. The unconscious shows us home too. Teach, peace is not somewhere else, is the rediscovered center. You cannot be exiled from yourself forever. Every dream, every symbol, every sorrow and joy has been leading you home. Closing the chapter, the unconscious tells us the final rest is not annihilation, is belonging. Dreams of homecoming remind us you are not wandering endlessly. You are circling back to where you have always belonged. The soul longs for return, and in dreams it finds it. We now arrive at the final threshold, the last chapter of this long journey. Every descent into sorrow, every spark of hope, every struggle and triumph has been preparing us for this moment. Now we step into Chapter 20, the Eternal Dream. Chapter 18. The Eternal Flame of Inspiration. The dream of the fire dreams often carry the image of flame. A torch handed from one figure to another, a candle that burns without consuming wax, a hearth fire that never goes out. The unconscious speaks. There is a fire within the soul, a flame that is neither of flesh nor time. It is inspiration, Jung's archetype of the flame. For Jung, inspiration was linked with the archetype of the creative spirit, the inner source from which art, music, poetry, science, and wisdom flow. It is not the ego's achievement, it comes from the collective unconscious. Poets, prophets, scientists all testify. The idea came not from them, but through them. In dreams, the flame signals this eternal source, burning in all human beings. Historical embers of inspiration, Moses before the burning bush, flame that spoke truth, Prometheus in Greek myth, stealing fire from the gods to gift humanity wisdom. The Prophet Muhammad saw receiving the first revelation, pouring into words that would ignite a civilization. Newton under an apple tree, the flash of gravity's law, Rumi, poetry flowing like fire from love. The eternal flame is not confined to saints or scholars, it is the birthright of every soul. Dream, symbols of inspiration, fire that does not burn, creativity that illuminates, not destroys, a spark in darkness, sudden idea, insight, breakthrough, a torch passed on, legacy, transmission of wisdom, the sun itself, the eternal source of light, creativity and life. Such symbols reveal that the psyche sees inspiration as divine fire. Philosophical and spiritual voices Plato. Inspiration is divine madness, a spark from the gods. The Vedas speak of Agni, the sacred fire that links humans with the divine. Jung, creativity is not invention, but discovery of the eternal patterns already inside. Einstein, I am not a genius. I am just passionately curious. Yet his visions came in dreamlike flashes. Inspiration, then, is the soul touching eternity. Cinematic depth. Picture this. In a dream, you walk in a desert night. Suddenly, a flame appears in your hand. It does not burn. It does not fade. It glows, steady and eternal. You realize this flame is not for you alone. It is for you to carry forward. The unconscious whispers, what you create, what you love, what you illuminate, this is how you outlive time. The collective flame of re-civilization is lit by its eternal flame. Athens by philosophy, India by spiritual insight, the Islamic Golden Age by knowledge, Renaissance by art. When flames flicker in one age, they are rekindled in another, human. History is not only cycles of rise and fall, it is also the steady transmission of inspiration. We live because others dreamed. Others will live because we dream. The gift of the eternal flame. Why does the unconscious show us fire in dreams? Because it reminds us we are not only beings of flesh, we are torchbearers of spirit. Inspiration is proof that we are connected to eternity, even when bodies perish. The flame we pass on continues. The flame is the soul's immortality. Closing the chapter, the unconscious tells us, nothing we create from love, beauty, truth, or wisdom is ever lost. It enters the eternal flame. Dreams of fire remind us, you are more than a dreamer. You are a light carrier, and the flame you carry is eternal. After the eternal flame comes a deeper realization. Every fire, every cycle, every dream is guiding us back to the source, the beginning, the origin. Now we step into Chapter 19, The Soul's Homecoming. Chapter 1:7. The emotional cycle returns. The dream of the eternal circle in dreams. Symbols of circles appear again and again. A spinning wheel, a serpent eating its own tail. The Ouroboros, a mandala, endlessly symmetrical. The unconscious speaks through these forms to remind us. Sorrow and joy, pain and bliss, despair and fulfillment, they do not cancel each other. They circle. Jung's insight on the cycle. Jung saw life not as a straight line, but as a spiral. In childhood, innocence; in youth, passion; on maturity, struggle; in old age, wisdom. But then the spiral loops back. Wisdom meets innocence again. Sorrow reopens joy, and endings seed beginnings. The unconscious keeps pulling us into rhythms, because life is not progress toward a finish, but a dance. Historical testimonies of the cycle. Nietzsche, with his doctrine of eternal recurrence. Would you live your life again infinitely? If yes, then you have lived it well. The Stoics taught that history repeats in cycles. Empires rise and fall as seasons return. Hindu cosmology speaks of yugasages that rise, collapse, and rise again. Islamic mystics like Rumi sang, "Don't get lost in your pain. Know that one day your pain will become your cure." Each voice confirms life is rhythm, not destination. Dream symbols of returner unconscious does not depict eternity as endless progress. It paints cycles, rising and setting suns. The tide that withdraws, then returns. Births after funerals, weddings after deaths. Recurrent places in dreams. Childhood home you revisit, though it has changed. Dreams remind us. Return is not regression, but renewal. The emotional dance to understand the cycle. Sorrow returns, but not as the same sorrow. It returns refined with new meaning. Joy returns, but not as naive bliss. It returns as gratitude sharpened by loss. Doubt returns, but now as a question that deepens wisdom. Hope returns because every despair carries a seed of light. This is why life feels both new and familiar, because the psyche remembers the cycle. Cinematic depth. Picture this: a dream of standing by a river. You throw a stone, it disappears beneath the surface. Moments later, the ripples circle back, touching your feet. The unconscious whispers, what you send out returns. What you lose returns in new form. Nothing is gone, it circles. Collective echoes of cycles, wars, and peace treaties. Nations rage, collapse, then rise again, seeking unity. Revolutions. Each generation rebels against the old, then becomes the old, and is rebelled against again. Artistic renaissances. After decline, beauty surges back. Florence, Paris, Vienna. Lahorich rebirth more brilliant than the last. Human history itself is a mandala. Cycle of endings and rebeginnings. Philosophical and spiritual voices. Laozi, return is the movement of the Tao. The Bible, what has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Jung, dreams of circles are not accidents. They are the soul's memory of eternity. The cycle is not futility, is continuity. Is continuity the gift of the cycle? Why does the unconscious insist on showing us circles? Because to despair in sorrow is to forget joy will return. To cling to joy is to forget sorrow will return. And teach us more. To embrace both is to live as whole. Completion does not end the rhythm, it folds back into it. Closing the chapter, the unconscious tells us, Nothing is ever final. Endings ripple into beginnings. Pain becomes wisdom. Joy becomes gratitude. The cycle is eternal. And so, even as dreams close one story, they open another, reminding us that the soul is not trapped in time, but turning forever in its eternal dance. End of chapter 17. The emotional cycle returns. Shall I continue into chapter 1:8. The eternal flame of inspiration from the cycle's rhythm rises something eternal, not bound by sorrow, not extinguished by time, inspiration now. We move into chapter 18, the eternal flame of inspiration. Chapter 16, the wisdom of completion, the dream of returning, in the language of dreams. Endings are never abrupt. They are ripenings, a setting sun, a completed mandala, a house once full of noise, now silent, resting. The unconscious does not speak of death as terror, it speaks of it as completion. The archetype of completion. Jung taught that the final stage of individuation is not youth striving, but acceptance. The wise old man, old woman archetype emerges in dreams. They appear at crossroads, thresholds, mountain peaks. They whisper not commands, but reassurance. It is enough. The circle is whole. Completion is not resignation, is wisdom distilled. Historical echoes of completion. Socrates, drinking hemlock calmly, teaching that wisdom is not fearing death, but accepting the soul's continuity. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his Meditations, death smiles at us all. All we can do is smile back. Mother Teresa, spending her last years in service, proving that completion is love's final form. Imam Ali Ra, declaring before his death, by the Lord of the Kaaba, I have succeeded. Each life, when ripened, became a testimony that ending is not defeat, is fulfillment. Dream symbols of completion, the unconscious paints with images. The harvest field, crops gathered, land resting, an ancient tree full of rings, roots, deep branches wide. The final step of a staircase, not a fall, but an arrival. Closing of a book, story told. Wisdom preserved, such symbols reveal. The soul does not collapse at its end. It comes full circle. Philosophical and spiritual voices. Heidegger called human beings toward death, meaning life is dignified when lived with death in mind. The Bhagavad Gita reminds, for the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. Ecclesiastes whispers, to everything there is a season, a time to be born and a time to die. Buddha taught impermanence, not as tragedy, but as the path to liberation. Completion, then, is wisdom. It frees us from clinging. Cinematic depth. This dream, you walk through a long hallway filled with doors. Each door leads to memories, childhood, youth, love, struggle. You open them, smile, then gently close each dot at the final door. There is no fear, only a great light. A figure waits not to take, but to welcome. The dream does not end, it transitions. Completion. In collective history, the fall of empires, Rome, Ottomans, dynasties, none died in vain. Each gave seeds to the next. The passing of visionaries. From Rumi to Einstein, whose ideas outlived their flesh. Rituals of completion, funerals, memorials, prayers, not as despair, but recognition that life's circle has turned. Completion is not collapse, it is legacy. Why completion brings peace? Because to resist endings is to suffer. To embrace endings is to transcend. To see life's arc not as broken, but whole, is the wisdom of the soul. The unconscious through dreams gives us rehearsal for this truth. Each small ending a school graduation, a farewell journey, a closed chapter prepares us for the final completion. Closing the chapter completion is not silence, it is the final note of a song that makes the music meaningful. Dreams, at this stage, teach us, when you embrace mortality, you are free to live fully. Completion is not the opposite of life, it is its crown. Dream Psychology of Carl Jung. How the Unconscious Speaks in Sleep. Chapter 17. The Emotional Cycle Returns. The Dream of the Eternal Circle in Dreams. Symbols of circles appear again and again. A spinning wheel, a serpent eating its own tail, the Ouroboros, a mandala, endlessly symmetrical. The unconscious speaks through these forms to remind us. Sorrow and joy, pain and bliss, despair and fulfillment, they do not cancel each other. They circle. Jung's insight on the cycle. Jung saw life not as a straight line, but as a spiral. In childhood, innocence. In youth, passion. In maturity, struggle. In old age, wisdom. But then the spiral loops back. Wisdom meets innocence again. Sorrow reopens joy, and endings seed beginnings. The unconscious keeps pulling us into rhythms, because life is not progress toward a finish, but a dance. Historical testimonies of the cycle. Nietzsche, with his doctrine of eternal recurrence, would you live your life again infinitely? If yes, then you have lived it well. The Stoics taught that history repeats in cycles. Empires rise and fall as seasons return. Hindu cosmology speaks of yugas, ages that rise, collapse, and rise again. Islamic mystics like Rumi sang, don't get lost in your pain. Know that one day your pain will become your cure. Each voice confirms, life is rhythm, not destination. Dream symbols have returned. The unconscious does not depict eternity as endless progress, it paints cycles, rising and setting suns. The tide that withdraws, then returns. Births after funerals. Weddings after deaths. Recurrent places in dreams. A childhood home you revisit. Though it has changed, dreams remind us. Return is not regression, but renewal. The emotional dance to understand the cycle. Sorrow returns, but not as the same sorrow. It returns refined, with new meaning. Joy returns, but not as naive bliss. It returns as gratitude, sharpened by loss. Doubt returns, but now as a question that deepens wisdom. Hope returns because every despair carries a seed of light. This is why life feels both new and familiar, because the psyche remembers the cycle. Cinematic depth. Picture this, a dream of standing by a river. You throw a stone, it disappears beneath the surface. Moments later, the ripples circle back, touching your feet. The unconscious whispers, what you send out returns. What you lose returns in new form. Nothing is gone, it circles. Collective echoes of cycles, wars and peace treaties. Nations rage, collapse, then rise again, seeking unity. Revolutions, each generation rebels against the old, then becomes the old, and is rebelled against again. Artistic renaissances after decline, beauty surges back. Florence, Paris, Vienna. Lahorich, rebirth, more brilliant than the last. Human history itself is a mandala, cycle of endings and re-beginnings. Philosophical and spiritual voices, lousy. Return is the movement of the Tao. The Bible, what has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Jung dreams of circles are not accidents. They are the soul's memory of eternity. The cycle is not futility, is continuity. The gift of the cycle. Why does the unconscious insist on showing us circles? Because to despair in sorrow is to forget joy will return. To cling to joy is to forget sorrow will return, and teach us more. To embrace both is to live as whole. Completion does not end the rhythm. It folds back into it, out of completion. A new cycle stirs because endings are not ends, but returns. Now we step into Chapter 17. The emotional cycle returns. Chapter 15. The celebration of unititha. Deep human longing. Every dreamer eventually reaches a place where solitude is not enough. Even in dreams, the unconscious whispers, "You are not alone." Images of unity emerge, hands joined in circles, families reunited, crowds singing together, rivers merging into oceans. It is the psyche's reminder that fulfillment is never only individual. It is collective. The archetype of the community. Carl Jung identified the self as the archetype of wholeness. But the self is not isolated, contains the other. This is the archetype of unity, the tribe gathered around the fire, the pilgrims circling the Kaaba, the choir singing one song with many voices. Unity is not the loss of the is the flowering of the individual within the whole. Historical celebrations of unity. Martin Luther King Jr., when he declared, "I have a dream," it was not his. It became a vision of unity, binding people across race and struggle. Mahatma Gandhi, leading millions in the Salt March, a symbol that one small act, multiplied by many, becomes unstoppable. Nelson Mandela, emerging from prison not with vengeance, but reconciliation, teaching that unity is stronger than bitterness. Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, in Medina, creating a community bound not by bloodline, but by shared faith and mutual responsibility. Each figure discovered that greatness is not only achieved alone, but together. Dream symbols of unity. The unconscious speaks of unity in rich symbols. Banquets and feasts. The soul celebrating togetherness. Bridges spanning rivers, reconciliation and connection. Children of every color, playing together, innocence and harmony. Circles, Jung's mandala, the ultimate image of wholeness and shared completion. Dreams remind us, joy deepens when shared. Philosophical and spiritual reflections. Aristotle called humans social animals. Finding meaning in the polis, the community. Ubuntu, philosophy of Africa teaches, "I am because we are." Rumi sang, "Don't get lost in your loneliness, for you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." Unity is the truth that the unconscious never tires of repeating. Your soul is infinite because it is connected. Cinematic imagery. Imagine a dream begins with you walking alone in a desert. The heat burns, the silence suffocates, but then one by one others appear. Strangers first, then friends, then family, then ancestors. Together you walk. The desert becomes a meadow. Voices rise in song. The dream no longer belongs to one person, it belongs to all of you. Collective moments in history. The Berlin Wall falls, strangers embrace. No longer divided by concrete. Millions march for freedom in India, South Africa, America. Communities rebuild after disaster. Proving compassion is stronger than destruction in every instance. The unconscious truth emerges. Unity is the crown of human joy. Why unity is celebration? Because when knowledge is shared, it becomes wisdom. When burdens are shared, they become lighter. When joy is shared, it becomes eternal. The unconscious gifts us with these visions to remind us that no dream is complete unless it is lived together. Closing the chapter, the celebration of unity is the music of the human spirit, each note unique, but the harmony transcendent. Dreams at this stage show us we are many, but we are one, and in that oneness there is a joy so deep it echoes eternity. When unity has been celebrated, the next truth unfolds, the realization that life's circle is nearing its quiet closure. Now we step into chapter 16, the wisdom of completion. Chapter 14, the joy of discovery, from survival to wonder. When the night ends, survival is not enough. The human spirit longs not only to live, but to know, to understand, to create. This is the stage where the unconscious speaks in dreams of new lands, cities of gold, or libraries of infinite knowledge, gifts, treasures, or secret maps, children laughing, flowers blooming, or music never heard before. The dreamer realizes joy is not just freedom from pain, it is the ecstasy of discovery. The archetype of the explorer, Carl Jung, recognized the unconscious as a boundless sea of symbols. To encounter it with awareness is like an explorer setting sail across uncharted oceans. The archetype here is the seeker, Columbus, crossing unknown seas, Magellan encircling the globe, Ibn Battuta mapping vast civilizations. But more than geography, the psyche seeks inner discovery, the revelation of hidden powers, talents, and truths. Historical journeys of joy. Galileo Galilei, lifting his telescope and glimpsing the moons of Jupiter, realizing humanity's place in the cosmos had shifted forever. Leonardo da Vinci, sketching flying machines, anatomy, and city plans, driven by joy in uncovering how life works. Albert Einstein, imagining himself riding a beam of light, which led to theories that reshaped physics itself. Rabia Bosri, discovering that divine love itself was the greatest joy, whispering, "I carry a torch in one hand and a bucket in the other, so that I may burn heaven and douse hell." To love God for himself alone. Each discovery is not just intellectual, it is spiritual elation. The dreamer's treasures at this stage of the unconscious. Dreams may bring chests of jewels opening, symbolizing new insights, doors into vast gardens, representing hidden creative powers, flights into the sky, symbolizing the mind's freedom. The psyche celebrates by offering gift symbols of the joy waiting within us. Philosophical and spiritual echo Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. Discovery is not just external, but self-knowledge. Nietzsche proclaimed the joy of becoming, of endless growth, of dancing with life's possibilities. Jung insisted that individuation was not duty but joy. The adventure of becoming whole. Discovery, then, is existential delight. Cinematic imagery pictured this. You are in a vast cave, dark and endless. Then suddenly you touch a wall, and it crumbles. Beyond it an entire universe of stars cascades into view. You run through meadows, not because you must escape, but because joy propels you. Every step is freedom. Every breath is discovery. The air is alive with color, sound, and newness. And you, like a child, laugh, unafraid. Collective joy of discovery. Societies, too, have experienced this rapture. The Renaissance, when Europe rediscovered forgotten Greek texts and exploded into art, science, and philosophy. The Islamic Golden Age, when Baghdad's house of wisdom preserved and expanded human knowledge, inventing algebra, refining astronomy, and enriching medicine. The space age, when humanity looked up and stepped beyond the earth, each moment proved the soul's joy is not just in survival, but in wonder. Why discovery is joyful. The unconscious speaks in symbols of discovery because it reflects a deep truth. To know is to be alive, to create is to be divine, to discover is to expand the boundaries of existence itself. The joy of discovery is the proof that human beings are not prisoners of the past, we are creators of the future. Closing the chapter, the joy of discovery is more than happiness, is the soul's laughter, the unconscious whispering, "You are infinite." Dreams at this stage no longer only heal, they celebrate. They reveal new paths, new loves, new truths. This is the chapter where despair becomes curiosity, and curiosity becomes bliss. Discovery blossoms into something greater when it is no longer solitary, it becomes shared. Now we enter Chapter 15, the celebration of unity. Chapter 13, the arrival of light, the first glimpse of radiance after the blackness of the night. The first golden thread of dawn seems miraculous. This is the moment when the unconscious, once veiled in shadows, finally unveils its treasures, dreams. In this phase are filled with rising suns, glowing orbs, or flames that do not consume, open doors, bridges, or pathways leading outward, reunions with loved ones, radiant figures, or divine beings. The psyche shifts. Where there was despair, there is clarity. Where there was imprisonment, there is liberation. The archetype of illumination, Carl Jung, saw light as the symbol of conscious integration. The shadow no longer dominates, it has been acknowledged. The ego, once broken by trials, now accepts guidance from the self. Wisdom, once hidden in darkness, now rises like the sun in myth and religion. This moment is everywhere. Christ's resurrection after the tomb, Buddha's enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree at dawn, Prometheus stealing fire to gift humanity light. The dawn is never cheap. It comes after the longest night. Historical dawns, Nelson Mandela, after 27 years of imprisonment, finally walked free. The world saw not bitterness in him, but lighter vision of reconciliation. Martin Luther King Jr., after years of marches and threats, declared, "I have been to the mountaintop. I have seen the promised land." His words were the dawn of a movement. Marie Curie, toiling in dim labs, finally saw the glow of radium in the darker light that redefined science and medicine. History reminds us the arrival of light changes not only one life, but generations, the dreamers awakening in the unconscious. This stage feels like release. The dreamer bursts into sunlight after wandering endless caves. A long-locked door swings wide, and fresh air rushes in. A stranger's hand, glowing with warmth, guides the dreamer into open fields. The heart quickens. Hope, once a faint ember, now blazes. Philosophical and spiritual resonance. Plato's allegory of the cave. Humanity rises from shadows into the blinding sun of truth. Rumi, the morning wind spreads its fresh smell. We must get up and take that in, that wind that lets us live. Jung, the dawn symbolizes individuation, when the conscious and unconscious unite in harmony. The arrival of light is not merely happiness, is wholeness. Cinematic imagery. This, you are on the same mountain ridge where hours ago despair gripped you. But now the horizon explodes with color, Crimson, gold, white fire pouring over the world. The fields awaken, rivers sparkle. The shadows vanish, not destroyed, but softened, and inside you something rises with the sun. A knowing, a certainty, a peace you thought lost forever. The collective dawn societies, too, know the arrival of light after wars. Peace treaties signed at sunrise, symbolizing rebirth. After pandemics, communities emerging with new values of unity and care. After revolutions, the people celebrating in streets as dawn breaks, banners waving in the morning glow. The collective unconscious loves. The image of light breaking darkness is humanity's eternal hope. The gift of illumination. The dawn teaches us suffering has meaning. Every trial prepared the way for growth. Light is earned. It comes not from denial, but from embracing the whole journey. Peace is possible. Even the deepest wounds can be transfigured into wisdom. This is why so many who endured darkness become beacons for others. Their light is not naive, it is hard-won. Closing the chapter, the arrival of light is the soul's reward for patience. It is the triumph of hope, the revelation of truth, the integration of shadow and self. The dreamer stands bathed in radiance, no longer a wanderer but a whole being. The unconscious whispers, the night is over, you are ready for the day. The light is not just survival, it reveals beauty, creativity, and wonder. Now we step into Chapter 14, The Joy of Discovery. Chapter 12. The moment before dawn, the suspended silence. Every journey has its darkest passage, the instant when collapse seems final, when endurance is stretched to its limits. Jung compared this psychic stillness to the nigredo of alchemy, the black stage before gold emerges. This is the moment before dawn, when the sky is blackest, yet the horizon secretly prepares for light. Dreams in this stage often reveal a desolate landscape, yet with faint glows at the edge, a locked door trembling as if something within longs to burst forth. A womb-like darkness, heavy but expectant. The unconscious holds the dreamer here, not to torture but to prepare. The psyche is gestating new life, historical echoes of the dark hour. Abraham Lincoln, before the Emancipation Proclamation, sank into depression so deep that friends feared for him. Yet out of that despair, his most courageous acts were born. Florence Nightingale, in the Crimean War, moved through blood-soaked nights, tending the dying with only a lamp. Her despair became the light that redefined nursing and compassion. Gandhi, after failed campaigns, sat in silence, fasting and praying. From his darkest nights came the strategies that reshaped empires. Each stood in the hour before dawn. Each endured silence that gave birth to transformation. The dreamers. Night vigil in dreams. This phase feels suffocating. The dreamer walks through endless corridors, searching for an exit. A heavy shadow follows, but no confrontation occurs. A long winter night stretches on. No sunrise in sight. Yet, beneath this despair, an unseen process unfolds. Just as seeds must remain buried in earth before breaking through, the psyche must rest in darkness before rebirth. The archetype of waiting this stage is marked by patience and faith. Symbols of waiting include the traveler at the threshold, unable to enter, the prisoner, staring at the barred window where dawn light barely flickers, the mother carrying the unborn child, aching for release. Jung taught that patience with the unconscious is vital, forcing enlightenment to early risks, shattering the fragile growth within. Philosophical reflections. Kierkegaard, Patience is necessary, and one cannot reap immediately where one has sown. Jung, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Rumi, the wound is the place where the light enters you. The moment before dawn is the wound, still bleeding, but already glowing faintly with healing. Cinematic image, repicture this. You stand on a mountain ridge at night. Behind you lies ruin, fire, collapse. Around you, the world is silent, too silent like a breath held by the universe. You watch the horizon. It is black, unbroken. Minutes pass, hours, you despair, and then barely perceptibly, the black fades into deep indigo. The outline of trees sharpens. The first bird stirs. The horizon glows, not yet gold, but silver. The moment before dawn has come, the collective symbol societies to endure their darkest vigils in post-war Europe. Starvation and ruin seemed endless, yet quietly seeds of recovery took root. In the American Civil Rights Movement, nights of violence were endured before victories were won. In every age, people have gathered in silence, holding candles, waiting for dawn. The collective unconscious knows, no night is eternal. The role of suffering it is in this moment that suffering finds its meaning. The night teaches, strength is not in avoiding despair, but enduring it. Silence is not emptiness, but preparation. Darkness is not the enemy, but the womb of new light. Closing the chapter the moment before dawn is sacred. It is the stillness before revelation, the pause before music, the silence before speech. The dreamer stands trembling, exhausted yet strangely calm. The unconscious whispers, "Hold on, the light is near." And so the psyche waits on the very edge of transformation. The horizon brightens. After long despair, silence, and waiting, the soul breaks into light. We now step into Chapter 13, The Arrival of Light. Chapter 11, The Turning of the Tide, the darkest hour before dawn. Every myth, every epic, every human story carries a rhythm. Descent, crisis, turning. Jung called this the enantiodromia, the law of reversal, where everything that reaches its extreme inevitably turns into its opposite. Thus, after collapse, something shifts. The unconscious, having reduced the ego to ashes, now plants a hidden seed of renewal. Dreams begin to change. Where once there were floods and fires, a single flower may appear. Where death dominated, a child is born in dream. Where betrayal reigned, a figure of compassion enters quietly. These are not yet triumphs, but the first signs of the tide turning. The archetype of renewal in dream imagery. The turning of the tide appears as the rising sun after endless night, green shoots sprouting. Through cracked earth, the phoenix emerging from ashes, the wounded healer, who brings medicine to the broken dreamer. These symbols announce that collapse has served its purpose. The soul is ready for rebirth. Historical parallels, the turning of the tide echoes through history's darkest hours. Winston Churchill, when Britain stood alone in 1940, refused to surrender. His words, "We shall never surrender," became a pivot, a collective dream that rallied a nation. Martin Luther King Jr., in a jail cell in Birmingham, wrote letters of fire that turned despair into a movement's renewal. Nelson Mandela, after 27 years of imprisonment, emerged not bitter but determined to reconcile. In each case, collapse was real, yet the human spirit turned the tide, the dreamers turning at the psychological level. This turning manifests as small but profound shifts. The dreamer, once crushed by nightmares, begins to sense curiosity instead of terror, a persecuting dream. Figure transforms into a guide. Shadows that once attacked now reveal hidden truths. A patient once reported recurring dreams of drowning. After months, the dream changed. He was still in water, but this time he began to swim. That is the turning. Philosophical voices Nietzsche. What does not kill me makes me stronger. Collapse breeds new strength. Hegel, history moves by dialectic thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis. Collapse and conflict give way to higher order Jung. The symbols of the self appear in the darkest dreams. At the nadir of despair, the light first shines. The cinematic sequence imagine. You are back in the dream city of ruin. Ashes still choke the streets. Towers lie broken. The ocean that drowned you has receded, leaving desolation. And then quietly you hear a sound, a bird singing, from a crack. In the pavement, a green vine pushes upward. You kneel, touch it. Warmth spreads through your hands. The sky, once black, softens into deep indigo. A star appears, then another. Dawn begins to whisper its promise. The tide is turning. The collective dimension, the turning, is not only personal but collective. Whole societies undergo collapse and renewal after the plague of the Middle Ages. Europe experienced the renaissance of flowering of art, science, and vision. After Hiroshima, humanity stared into the abyss of annihilation, yet movements for peace, human rights, and disarmament surged. After tragedies, people gather, light candles, and speak the language of solidarity. Dreams remind us. The psyche itself carries a rhythm of renewal. The symbol of the child Jung emphasized the archetype of the child as the supreme symbol of rebirth. When the tide turns, dreams often bring images of infants, play, or innocent figures. Why? Because the child represents potential, a new life, not yet shaped by despair. Hope, the innocence that cannot be corrupted. Future, the assurance that existence goes on. Closing the chapter, the turning of the tide is subtle. It is not victory, yet the ruins remain. The scars endure, but within the ashes, new shoots rise. The unconscious whispers, now not of death, but of life. You have survived. You will rise. Out of collapse, the self is reborn. The dreamer feels the first stirrings of renewal. The tide is turning. We now enter the threshold between endings and beginnings. Chapter 12. The moment before dawn. Here the unconscious pauses, holding its breath. The dreamer feels the weight of despair still clinging, yet the first glimmers of light promise release. Chapter 8. The night of suspense, the stillness before the storm. Every great story carries a moment of suspense. In Greek tragedy, it is the pause before fate strikes. In Shakespeare, it is the silence before Macbeth's dagger appears. In our lives too, there comes a night when the world seems to stop, and we feel suspended between despair and revelation. For Jung, suspense is not mere waiting. It is the psychic tension of opposites. The enantiodromia turning point, where what has gone too far must swing to its opposite. In dreams, suspense is often shown as standing at a cliff's edge, uncertain whether to fall or fly, waiting for a train that never arrives. The unconscious holding us in expectancy, being chased but never caught, the endless pursuit of something unnamed. Dark corridors, doors ajar but not opening, thresholds unresolved. The unconscious uses suspense to stretch us, to force us into patience, to teach us endurance of uncertainty. Suspense in dreams, woman Jung studied dreamed of sitting in a dark theater. The curtain trembled but would not rise. She felt fear, anticipation, helplessness. When finally the curtain lifted, she saw not actors but a mirror, her own face staring back. The dream suspended her so she would confront herself. Another dream, a man stood in a station, hearing the train approach but never seeing it arrive. He waited, heart pounding. The dream ended there, Jung explained. Suspense itself is the lesson. The psyche is teaching him to endure waiting without forcing resolution. Suspense is not empty, it is charged with meaning. The symbolism of night suspense is often tied to night in myths and dreams. Night is both womb and tomb darkness, holding the seed of rebirth in Gilgamesh. After losing his friend Enkidu, he wanders into the night, suspended between grief and wisdom. In the Bible, Jacob wrestles with the angel until dawn, an entire night of suspense before receiving his blessing. In Buddhist tales, the night of the Buddha's enlightenment was filled with demons of doubt. Suspense before illumination. Night suspense is universal, it marks the soul's initiation. Philosophical. Reflections on suspense's errand. Kierkegaard described suspense as the dizziness of freedom, the moment before choice. Trembling with possibilities. Nietzsche saw suspense as part of eternal recurrence, the hesitation before saying yes to life again. Jung himself wrote, "Only in the suspension between opposites does the transcendent function appear." Suspense is not paralysis. It is the seedbed of revelation. Suspense in history. Humanity has lived through collective nights of suspense. The Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. The world held its breath for 13 days, suspended between annihilation and peace. The fall of the Berlin Wall, 1989, for decades. East and West lived in a tense suspension before the wall finally cracked. Apollo 11 moon landing, 1969. The suspense of silence as Neil Armstrong descended the ladder. The world waiting in one collective heartbeat. Suspense, in these moments, became history's turning point. Suspense in art and music. Artists have long mastered suspense. Beethoven, in his symphonies, would pause holding silence so charged it vibrated louder than sound. Hitchcock, the master of suspense in cinema, said, "There is no terror in the bang, only in the anticipation of it." In poetry, T.S. Eliot spoke of life lived between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, the suspense of being human. Dreams, too, are artists. They create suspense, not to torment us, but to shape our inner narrative. Cinematic dream vision. Picture this. You stand in a forest at night. The moon glimmers faintly through clouds. Every tree is a shadow. Somewhere you hear a whisper, then silence. Your heart pounds. You walk deeper. The forest seems endless. Suddenly, a clearing opens, but empty, silent, waiting. You know something is about to appear, but the dream wakes you before it comes. This is the unconscious suspending the story, teaching you to live in the tension, to accept the unfinished. The role of suspense in transformation. Suspense is necessary because transformation is not instant. Between destruction and rebirth, there must be pause. The psyche holds its breath while something unseen grows. Like the chrysalis stage of a butterfly, an entire being dissolved into soup before wings form. Suspense is the cocoon. Without suspense, there is no patience, no gestation, no trust in becoming. Personal suspense. Reflect. Have you known a night of suspense, waiting for test results, for a phone call, for forgiveness, for the turning of fate. That waiting carved you, did it not? It stretched you, humbled you, deepened you. The unconscious whispers, suspense is not emptiness. It is the womb of what will come. Closing the chapter, suspense is uncomfortable. It gnaws at the nerves, sets the heart racing, fills the night with uncertainty. Yet it is holy. It is the silence before revelation, the darkness before dawn, the trembling before the curtain rises. The unconscious shows us suspense in dreams, so we may learn. Trust the night, hold the silence, something is coming. Excellent. We step deeper into the mythic underworld of the psyche. Chapter 9, The Archetypal Confrontation. Here, the unconscious no longer whispers, it roars. It brings forth its great symbol shadows, monsters, guides, and gods to force the dreamer into confrontation with the deepest truths. Chapter 10, The Edge of Collapse. The breaking point. Every genuine transformation requires a breaking point. Jung compared it to alchemical dissolution, the stage where the old form must disintegrate before new substance can be forged in dreams. This collapse manifests as falling endlessly through space, being trapped in prisons, mazes, or tombs, drowning in floods, oceans, or dark waters, watching cities burn or worlds end. Such images terrify the ego because they symbolize its death. The ego's desperation. The ego clings desperately to control. When the unconscious overwhelms it, the dreamer may experience panic dreams of being chased, cornered with no escape, nightmares of betrayal, friends, lovers, or family turning hostile, catastrophic imagery of apocalypse, explosions, earthquakes, plagues. These are not random terrors. They are the psyche dramatizing the ego's collapse, the death of illusions that no longer serve. The betrayal archetype, one of the most painful dream themes at the edge of collapse, is betrayal. Dream. Example: a man dreams his wife conspires with strangers to poison him. He wakes in terror, furious and suspicious. Yet the dream is not about her. It is about his own psyche. Unconscious is betraying the ego's false sense of stability. Betrayal in dreams symbolizes the tearing away of false attachments. The psyche betrays the ego so the soul can be free. The abyss. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard described despair as sickness unto death. Nietzsche spoke of staring into the abyss. Jung encountered this in his Red Book visions, where he descended into hellish landscapes, confronted demons, and nearly lost his sanity. The abyss is archetypal. Every hero must enter it. Odysseus descends into Hades. Christ enters the tomb. Dante journeys through Inferno. The Buddha confronts Mara under the Bodhi tree in dreams. The abyss appears as endless night, bottomless pits, black oceans. The soul is stripped bare. The death imagery. Dreams at the edge of collapse often bring death itself. Seeing one's own corpse, attending funerals of strangers, watching animals slaughtered, wandering graveyards. These images are not omens of literal death, they are symbols of psychic death, the dissolution of outdated structures. Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But one must die to be reborn. The near-psychotic threshold, Jung warned that confronting the unconscious can mimic madness. Some dreamers at this stage report overwhelming dreams that bleed into waking life, synchronicities that feel like reality itself is collapsing, a sense that the ego cannot hold together. This is why Jung emphasized integration without grounding. The confrontation with the unconscious can lead to breakdown. With patience and reflection, however, it leads to renewal. Philosophical parallels Heraclitus. The way up and the way down are one and the same. Collapse is the same path as ascent. Heidegger described being toward death as the foundation of authentic existence. Jung collapse is not regression, but the night sea journey, a necessary descent before transformation. Cinematic dream sequence. Cinematic dream sequence. Imagine you stand in a vast city. Suddenly, the ground trembles, towers crumble, the sky splits open, fire rains down. People scream and scatter. You run, but every street ends in ruin. At last, you reach a cliff. Behind you, the world burns. Before you, an endless black ocean stretches to the horizon. You fall to your knees. The ocean rises, waves like mountains. You scream as the water engulfs you. Darkness swallows everything. Silence, and then within the silence, a faint glimmer of light, flickering, waiting. The purpose of collapse, the unconscious, destroys not to annihilate but to renew. Collapse is not the end but the threshold to rebirth. Without this, the ego would cling forever to its small certainties, just as forests burn to allow new growth. The psyche must sometimes reduce the ego to ashes so that the deeper self can emerge. Closing the chapter, the edge of collapse is terrifying, unavoidable, and necessary. Dreams that bring us to death, betrayal, and ruin are the psyche's way of stripping illusions. The unconscious whispers through the ruins, "Let go. What must die has died. What endures will endure." Through the ashes, a new self waits to be born. The dreamer is shattered, but not destroyed. What comes next is transformation. We now cross into the deepest valley of the psyche, chapter 11, the turning of the tide. Here, the dreamer, after wandering through ruin and collapse, begins to sense the faintest stirring of renewal. Chapter 9, the archetypal confrontation. When the psyche summons its powers, Carl Jung believed that the unconscious does not merely contain forgotten memories. It holds archetypes, primordial patterns of human experience. These archetypes emerge in dreams, myths, and visions, often as figures, the shadow, the dark double, everything we repress, the anima, animus, the inner feminine in men, the inner masculine in women, the wise old man, woman, the guide, bearer of timeless wisdom, the hero, the part of us that must journey, struggle, and transform the self, the ultimate archetype, symbolizing wholeness. When archetypes emerge in dreams, they are not symbolic decorations. They are psychic events, forces that demand recognition. The shadow appears. The most terrifying and necessary archetypal encounter is with the shadow. Dream, example. A man dreams he is pursued by a black figure through winding streets. He runs, hides, panics, till the figure catches him. When he looks, the face is his own, twisted in rage, Jung wrote. The shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door whose painful constriction no one is spared if he goes down to the deep well. The shadow is everything we deny: fear, anger, jealousy, weakness, desire. Dreams confront us with it, not to destroy us, but to force wholeness. The hero's battle confronting the shadow activates the hero archetype. Myths of Hercules, Gilgamesh, Beowulf, and even Luke Skywalker mirror the dreamer's inner drama. Each hero must face the monster, the shadow, descend into the underworld, the unconscious, return transformed with new wisdom. Dreams place us in these archetypal myths. Fighting serpents, climbing mountains, standing before armies, these are not random images. They are the psyche dramatizing our inner conflicts in the language of myth. The anima and animosen, other archetypal confrontation, occurs with the anima animus. For men, the anima appears in dreams as a woman's deductive, terrifying, inspiring, or wise. She carries the man's unlived emotional life. For women, the animus appears as a man powerful, stubborn, cruel, or guiding. He carries her unlived intellectual, spiritual potential. Dream example. A woman dreams of arguing with a stern, bearded man who blocks her path. This is her animus, showing her the rigidity of her own unexpressed authority. Anima animus encounters are not about romance. They are initiations into balance, into integration of the soul's missing half. The wise guide at the edge of despair. Dreams sometimes send the wise old man or woman. They may appear as a grandmother offering bread, a mysterious monk, a talking animal with gentle eyes. This figure does not solve problems directly, but offers cryptic guidance, like Gandalf, Dumbledore, or Yoda. Jung believed this archetype represents the self preparing to emerge, the self, the mandala of wholeness. The ultimate archetypal confrontation is with the self. Dreams may show a mandala, circle or cross, a radiant child, a temple or radiant jewel, a voice speaking with authority. These symbols mark the psyche striving toward individuation, the union of conscious and unconscious, a wholeness beyond ego. For Jung, encountering the self is a spiritual event, not just a psychological one. He called it the God image in the soul. Historical echoes of archetypal confrontation archetypes erupt not only in individuals, but in collective history. Martin Luther King, Jr. confronted America's shadow, its racism, and became the hero visionary. His "I have a dream" was not only a speech, but an archetypal call. Nelson Mandela faced his shadow in prison, then emerged as the wise guide for his nation. Joan of Arc embodied the anima, a young woman channeling divine authority, reshaping history. Mahatma Gandhi exemplified the hero not by violence, but by renunciation, the archetype, transfigured into non-violence. These were not mere political figures. They were archetypes embodied in history. Philosophical insights. Plato saw archetypes as forms eternal, patterns behind the world of appearances. Nietzsche's Bermensch is the hero archetype, confronting chaos to create new values. Described the confrontation with despair as a meeting with a shadow that forces faith. Jung united these visions. Archetypes are not abstract, they live in dreams, myths, and the unconscious. Cinematic dream sequence. Imagine you walk into a vast cave. The walls shimmer with ancient paintings. Suddenly, from the shadows, a figure steps forward. It is you, but darker, taller, eyes burning. You raise your hand to strike, but then realize the figure is not attacking. It waits, it mirrors, it demands recognition. You fall to your knees. The cave shatters into light. In the center, a glowing mandala spins, radiant with colors. You feel both fear and peace. You have met yourself. The risk and the reward. Archetypal confrontations are dangerous. Jung warned. To confront a person with his own shadow is to show him his own light. Yet many resist. Some are consumed by inflation, believe themselves gods after glimpsing the Kumseg self. Others flee back into denial. But those who endure gain something beyond measure: integrity, balance, wholeness. Closing the chapter, the unconscious is not gentle. It stages battles of gods and monsters in our sleep. Yet every confrontation is love in disguiser, summons to greater being. Dreams whisper, do not flee your monsters. They are your teachers. Do not deny your guides. They are your future. Archetypal. Confrontation is the crucible of the soul. Only through it can we become more than fragments. Perfect, we now descend into one of the most perilous thresholds of the psyche, Chapter 10, The Edge of Collapse. Here the dreamer's confrontation with the unconscious becomes so overwhelming that it threatens annihilation. But in this collapse lies the seed of rebirth. Chapter 6, The Fire of Resilience. Hope begins as a spark, but if tended, if fed with faith, courage, and endurance, it becomes fire. And fire, Jung reminds us, is one of the most ancient archetypes of transformation. It destroys, but it also purifies. It consumes, but it also warms and illuminates. In the language of dreams, fire often represents the burning core of the self, the energy that refuses to be extinguished even when everything collapses. Where hope whispers, not yet, resilience roars, I will rise. Resilience as archetype. Resilience is not mere survival. It is the psyche's capacity to bend without breaking, to endure without surrendering, to transform pain into strength. Across myths and religions, fire has always symbolized resilience. The phoenix, burning to ashes and rising anew, eternal in its cycles of death and rebirth. Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods for humanity, defying punishment so that mortals might endure. Moses and the burning bush, a fire that burned without being consumed, symbol of divine resilience and presence. These myths remind us that resilience is not avoidance of suffering. It is the sacred endurance that grows within it. Dreams of fire. Jung noted that people facing crises often dreamed of fire. A woman battling cancer dreamed of carrying a torch through a dark forest. Her illness had not extinguished her inner flame. A soldier, traumatized by war, dreamed of standing in a burning city, but holding a candle that never went out, his psyche reminding him that his inner light survived. A man grieving his son's death dreamed of a hearthfire, steadily glowing, as if his child's love was still warming him. In each dream, fire symbolized resilience, not the denial of pain, but the strength to live through it. Historical flames of resilience. History burns with stories of fire that refuse to die. During the London Blitz of World War II, bombs fell nightly, but citizens painted on walls, "We can take it," there. Resilience became the fire that carried them through destruction. In Hiroshima, after the atomic bomb leveled the city, survivors planted trees in the ruins. Today, those trees still stand, a living flame of resilience. In the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of unearned suffering as redemptive. His voice was fire igniting resilience in millions. These flames remind us that resilience is not a luxury of the strong. It is the birthright of the human spirit. Letters of resilience from the Warsaw Ghetto in 1942. A mother wrote to her child before being taken away, "They may take my body, but not my song. Sing, my love, sing for me when I am gone." From Nelson Mandela's Prison Diary, Robben Island, 1976. I have learned that courage is not the absence of fear, it is the triumph over it. Chains can bind the flesh, but they cannot bind the spirit. From Anne Frank's diary, written in hiding. I keep my ideals, because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. Resilience speaks even when surrounded by destruction. These words are fire against the coldest night. The fire in cinema, picture this. A man walks barefoot through burning ruins, ash falling like snow. Around him, destruction stretches endlessly. Yet he carries a child in his arms, shielding the little one with his body. He does not falter. The camera zooms in on his eyes, not empty, but burning with quiet determination. The soundtrack swells, not triumphant, but steady, resilient. This is fire. Not glorious, not easy, but unyielding. This is the essence of resilience. Philosophy of resilience. Philosophers across centuries have wrestled with suffering, and their answer often burns with resilience. Nietzsche, that which does not kill us makes us stronger. Marcus Aurelius, the fire feeds on what falls into it. The flame grows stronger by consuming. Viktor Frankl, survivor of Auschwitz, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms: to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. For Jung, resilience was the psyche's way of transforming trauma into individuation, the painful process of becoming whole. The fire purifies us, shaping us into something greater than before. Collective resilience communities to hold fire after the 2004 tsunami. Entire villages in Indonesia rebuilt together, resilience not of individuals, but of families and tribes. After 9/11, firefighters ran into burning towers, carrying not only their bodies but the fire of courage. In refugee camps across the world, children continue to play, laugh, and draw picture sparks of resilience, refusing to die. This resilience is not only personal, it is shared, communal, carried forward in songs, rituals, and stories. Resilience in you. Think back to your own life. When did you face the fire? Perhaps you lost someone, or suffered rejection, or endured loneliness. Perhaps you thought you would break, and yet you did not. Something inside you burned, however faintly. You stood again, even if trembling. That was resilience. That was your fire. The unconscious does not let us collapse completely. In dreams, it hands us fire and image, a symbol, a strength to keep walking forward. The phoenix within Jung loved the image of the phoenix, the bird that burns and rises again. He saw it not as fantasy, but as symbol of the psyche's eternal capacity to regenerate. Each of us contains a phoenix. Each of us has burned in some way through grief, betrayal, failure. Yet within the ashes lies the seed of renewal. The unconscious knows this truth before we do. That is why, even in despair, dreams give us fire. Closing the chapter, the fire of resilience burns quietly, yet it is indestructible. Hope was the spark. Resilience is the flame that carries us forward, even when winds of despair try to extinguish it. Dreams do not lie. They give us fire not because the journey is easy, but because it is necessary. They remind us, you are not only what you have lost, you are also the fire that survives the loss. Excellent, we've passed through hope and resilience. Now, in Chapter 7, the unconscious leads us deeper into the trial of transformation. Resilience alone is not enough. It must be tested, shaped, and refined by ordeals. This is where Jung's dream psychology shows us how suffering becomes alchemy. The ordeal as gateway in myths. Before the hero can claim the treasure, they must endure trials. Hercules faced 12 labors. Odysseus wandered for 10 years. Christ endured the desert. The Buddha confronted Mara under the Bodhi tree. For Jung, this ordeal is not just myth, it is the lived experience of every human psyche. Transformation demands testing. The fire of resilience must meet the forge of trial in dreams. Trials often appear as labyrinths, symbolizing confusion, where the dreamer must trust intuition to find the way. Monsters, projections of inner fear requiring confrontation. Floods and storms, the psyche drowning. Unless one learns to swim, broken bridges, crumbling stairs, locked doors, symbols of barriers, where effort, patience, or new strength must emerge. These are not random nightmares. They are the unconscious saying, "Here is your trial. Do not run from it. Pass through it, and you will be changed." Dreams of Trilliong once wrote of a patient who dreamed she was climbing a mountain barefoot, stones cutting into her feet. At the summit, she found a golden chalice. She woke, exhausted but radiant. The dream had placed her in a of pain so she could discover the treasure within. Another man dreamed he was lost in a desert, thirst parching his lips. At the horizon, he saw a well, but a serpent guarded it. The serpent, Jung explained, was not an enemy, it was the trial. Only by facing it could the dreamer drink the water of renewal. Trials in dreams strip us bare, demanding not comfort but courage. The alchemy of suffering Jung drew deeply from alchemy. He believed the psyche, like lead, must undergo fire and pressure to transform into gold. The alchemists called this stage Negredo, the blackening. It is the breaking down of what we were. In dreams, Negredo appears as decay, death, destruction. The ego resists it, but the unconscious insists. Transformation requires dissolution. Only then comes albedo, the whitening, cleansing, illumination. And finally, rubeto, the reddening, the rebirth into wholeness. Trials, then, are not punishment. They are alchemy. They dismantle what is false, so that something true may be born. Voices of trial in history bears witness to those who endured trials that reshaped humanity. Socrates, facing death, drank the hemlock calmly, saying, "The unexamined life is not worth living." His trial gave philosophy its soul. Joan of Arc, burned at the stake, endured the trial with faith so unshaken that centuries later she was canonized. Malala Yousafzai, shot for seeking education, turned her trial into a global movement for girls' rights. Each ordeal was not an end, but a transformation. The individuals suffered, but their spirit became larger than life. Cinematic vision of trial. Imagine a dreamlike sequence. A person walks through a vast desert at night. Stars burn overhead. Suddenly, the ground cracks open into a canyon. They must leap. The chasm yawns wider and wider. Fear rises, but then wings unfurl from their back. Wings they never knew they had. They leap, not falling, but soaring. Carried across the abyss, the trial has revealed hidden powers. This is how the unconscious tests us, not to destroy, but to awaken capacities we never suspected. Letters from the forge from a Russian prisoner in Siberia, 1941. The cold is a trial, but it has shown me what warmth really means. I had never valued a flame, a crust of bread, or a kind word until I was stripped bare. Now I know. From a monk in Tibet, imprisoned for 17 years, the greatest danger I faced was not the tortures, but losing compassion for my captors. That was the trial. I did not lose it. From a Holocaust survivor, I walked through hell, but hell taught me, even in the darkness, a hand can reach out, a song can rise, a heart can keep beating. Trials purify the human voice into something eternal. Philosophical Reflections, Kierkegaard wrote, "The greater the difficulty, the greater the glory in surmounting it." Simone, while called suffering gravity, a force that pulls us toward the real, Rumi whispered. The wound is the place where the light enters you. For Jung, these were all different languages describing the same truth. Trials transform us, if we allow them. Collective trials, humanity itself undergoes ordeals. The Black Plague in medieval Europe, which killed millions, but also transformed. Medicine, science, and faith. The Great Depression, which broke economies, yet gave birth to new solidarities and policies of care. The COVID-19 pandemic, a modern trial, stripping illusions of control, forcing communities to reconsider what truly matters. Collective trials are the psyche of humanity in transformation. We burn, but from the ashes, new forms rise. Your trials pause. Remember your own trials, the heartbreak that nearly crushed you, the failure that humiliated you, the loss that hollowed your chest. At the time, you may have cursed them, but look closer. Did they not shape you into who you are? Did they not awaken a strength, a compassion, a depth that you would never have gained otherwise? The unconscious sends us trials, not to punish, but to forge, to make us more whole, more alive. Closing the chapter, the trial of transformation is hard. Yes, it burns, breaks, and wounds. But it also awakens, reveals, and purifies. Dreams do not show us trials to frighten us. They show us so we may know. This is your path. Walk it, endure it. It is the alchemy that will turn you into gold. The unconscious whispers through dreams. Do not fear the trial. Within it lies your becoming. Perfect, we step now into chapter 8, the night of suspense. Here, the unconscious holds its breath. After resilience and trials, the psyche enters a threshold, a place of waiting, of trembling uncertainty. This is the midnight of transformation, where suspense reigns. Chapter 2, the fragility of existence. The silence that lingers after sorrow is not peace, is fragility. It is the tremor in the soul when it realizes that life itself rests on a thread so fine, so delicate, that the smallest gust of fate can snap it. This awareness, this confrontation with mortality, is one of the deepest wells of human despair and, paradoxically, one of the richest sources of dream symbolism. Carl Jung described the unconscious as the custodian of life's fragile truths. He observed that, in dreams, death is never only about death. It is about transformation, endings, and the vulnerability of existence. To dream of falling, to dream of drowning, to dream of your own funeral, these are not accidents of sleep. They are reminders of the truth we often refuse in waking life, that we are mortal, temporary, fleeting, and yet fragility is not weakness. It is the essence of beauty. A cherry blossom's worth lies in its short bloom. A candle's glow is holy precisely because it cannot last. To feel fragility is to feel the pulse of existence in its rawest form. The dream of mortality, let us step into a dream. You are standing on a bridge suspended above a vast abyss. The wind howls. Beneath your feet, the planks creak and bend. On the far side of the bridge stands someone you love, their hand outstretched, calling your name. But halfway across, the bridge begins to collapse. You wake with your heart racing, the image burned into your mind. What is this dream telling you? Jung would say. It is not about the bridge, or even about the fall. It is about the truth of fragility, that our lives, our loves, our connections, all hang suspended above the unknown. This is the unconscious speaking, not to terrify, but to awaken. Dreams remind us of mortality so that life may be lived more vividly. more fully. Philosophers in the shadow of death, the fragility of existence, has haunted the greatest thinkers in history. And Kierkegaard wrote that despair is the sickness. Unto death not, the death of the body, but the despair of realizing one's own nothingness. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, penned in his Meditations, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Leo Tolstoy, at the height of fame, was seized by terror of death so great that he confessed, "Why go on? Why live? Is there any meaning that cannot be destroyed by death?" Each of them, in their own way, stood on the dream bridge of fragility. And from that bridge, they saw not only despair, but also the possibility of deeper meaning. Letters from the Brink in 1942. In the darkness of World War II, a young woman named Etty Hillesum kept a diary while awaiting deportation to Auschwitz. She wrote, "I know that life and death make a meaningful whole. I dwell within this fragile space, and yet my soul feels vast. Death is not the enemy, it is the companion that makes each hour precious." E.T.'s words echo Jung's insights. She understood that fragility does not destroy meaning, it creates it. Without fragility, there is no urgency, no intensity, no awakening. Dreams often carry this same message. They present us with symbols of death, not to extinguish our spirit, but to deepen it. The archetype of the fragile vessel Jung often spoke of the psyche as a vessel. In dreams, this vessel appears as a cup, a jar, a fragile object that can shatter at any moment. These dreams remind us of the delicate container of human life. Ancient myths also carried this archetype. Pandora's jar, once opened, released all the world's suffering. The Holy Grail, delicate and elusive, symbolized the eternal search for transcendence. Even the body of Christ, in Christian tradition, broken, fragile, became the vessel of salvation. Fragility is not merely weakness. It is the very form in which the divine, the eternal, touches the human. The cinematic scene of fragility picture, a film sequence, a child blowing soap bubbles into the air. Each bubble rises, shimmering with light, reflecting the entire world in its fragile sphere. Then pop, it is gone. The child laughs, blows another, and again the world floats for a moment before vanishing. This is life. This is us. Our existence is a bubble, delicate, temporary, yet dazzling. Dreams remind us of this truth by showing us broken glass, collapsing structures, fleeting moments that dissolve as soon as we reach them. They are mirrors of our fragility, urging us to cherish what is fleeting. The cry for meaning, what do humans do when they awaken to fragility? Some despair, others rebel. Many turn to religion, philosophy, or art. The Psalms of David cry out, "Man is like a breath. His days are like a fleeting shadow." Shakespeare wrote in Macbeth, "Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more." Rainer Maria Rilke, in his Duino Elegies, pleaded, "Beauty is nothing but the beginning of terror we are just able to endure." All of these are confessions of fragility, yet also acknowledgements of its strange beauty. The turning point within fragility, Jung saw dreams of fragility as thresholds. To dream of one's own death is not a prophecy of doom, but an invitation to transformation. The unconscious uses the image of death to signal the need for change, for rebirth, for a new way of being. In this sense, fragility is not the end. It is the turning point. Think of the caterpillar enclosed in its cocoon, dissolving into nothing before becoming a butterfly. In that moment, it is as fragile as dusty it. It is precisely that fragility that makes metamorphosis possible. Our dreams of death, endings, and collapse are like cocoons. They invite us to let go of the old so that something new may be born. The historical mirror of fragility history, too, is filled with fragile moments. The fall of the Roman Empire, vast civilization collapsing under its own weight, was too. Its people, a dream of the world ending. The Great Depression, when banks failed and families stood in breadlines, was a collective dream of fragility. A reminder that prosperity is never secure. The Cuban Missile Crisis, when humanity stood on the edge of nuclear annihilation, was fragility on a planetary scale. And yet, from these fragile moments, new wisdoms, new systems, new movements arose. Fragility does not destroy history, it reshapes it. A personal mirror, close your eyes for a moment. Recall a time in your life when everything felt fragile, when the future seemed like glass that could shatter with one wrong step. Perhaps it was the loss of someone you loved. Perhaps it was the collapse of a dream, a job, a relationship. Remember how vulnerable you felt. And yet, remember also how alive. Fragility sharpens awareness. It burns away illusions. It forces us to confront what matters most. Dreams replay these fragile moments, not to torment us, but to keep us awake to life. The wisdom of the fragile, the wisdom of fragility is this: nothing is guaranteed, and because nothing is guaranteed, everything matters. A kiss matters. A kind word matters. A single sunrise matters. In dreams, the unconscious speaks this wisdom through fleeting images, flowers that vanish when you touch them, voices that fade as you strain to hear, doors that close before you reach them. These are not cruelties, they are lessons. They remind us that life's beauty is inseparable from its fragility. The archetype of resurrection pointed out that nearly every culture carries myths of death and resurrection. Osiris, Dionysus, Christ, all die, all descend, all rise again. This archetype is not about literal immortality. It is about fragility transformed. Death is real, but so is renewal. The unconscious uses dreams of death to whisper, "This is not the end, it is the threshold." Closing the chapter, as we leave this second chapter, the candle flickers lower still. We have descended into sorrow and now into fragility. The unconscious has shown us the trembling bridge, the fragile vessel, the fleeting bubble. We are not yet at hope, not yet at resilience. That will come later. For now, we must dwell in the truth that life is delicate, temporary, and mortal, and yet within that fragility lies beauty. For the unconscious whispers again, because you are fragile, you are precious. Because you are mortal, you are alive. Because you are fleeting, you are eternal in your longing. Excellent, let's move into the third stage of the journey, when sorrow and fragility harden into endurance, when despair becomes the forge of wisdom. Dream psychology of Carl Jung, how the unconscious speaks in Sleep Chapter 3. The weight of suffering. There is a moment in every human life when sorrow ceases to be fleeting and becomes weight. It no longer comes and goes like passing rain, but settles upon the shoulders, pressing into the bones, shaping the soul's very structure. Jung recognized this weight not as a curse, but as a profound teacher. For, in the crucible of suffering, the unconscious speaks with its deepest voice. Dreams in times of suffering are different. They are not fragile bubbles that vanish at dawn. They are heavy, persistent, unforgettable. They come in images of chains, prisons, endless roads, storms that never cease. Such dreams reflect the inner gravity of suffering, the way it anchors us in realities we cannot escape. And yet, in this heaviness, something stirs: resilience, endurance, and the first flicker of insight. Chapter 5: The Spark of Hope. Hope does not arrive with trumpets or fanfare. It comes as a whisper, a flicker, a fragile spark against overwhelming night. Jung observed that in the darkest hours of human struggle, dreams often introduce small images of light: a candle in a cave, a bird singing in ruins, a child smiling amidst war. These are not random. They are the psyche's way of telling us the darkness is not absolute. A beginning is near. In life, as in dreams, hope often arises when it seems least possible. It is not the denial of suffering, but its companion. It is the ember that refuses to die even in the coldest night. The archetype of the light in darkness. One of Jung's most profound insights was that the unconscious contains balancing forces. When we are buried in despair, the psyche compensates with images of hope. This is why a grieving mother dreams of a blooming tree. A prisoner dreams of an open window. A man on the brink of suicide dreams of sunrise. These sparks are archetypal. They appear in myths as fires stolen from the gods, as guiding stars, as miraculous visions. They remind us that even when everything collapses, something eternal whispers, "Not yet. There is more." Historical Sparks of Hope. History 2 is written in Sparks. In 1940, when Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany, Winston Churchill told his people, "We shall never surrender." His words were not victory, but they were hope. A spark that carried a nation through its darkest hour in apartheid South Africa. Mandela wrote from prison, "I am convinced that floods of despair can be overcome by a single drop of hope." His spark became a torch for millions. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space. The world, divided by Cold War, suddenly looked upward in wonder. His smile from orbit was more than triumph. It was hope for humanity's limitless possibility. These sparks did not end suffering, but they lit paths forward, proving that despair is never final. Letters of Hope from Prison. In 1944, Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote to his fiancée, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. I dream not of release, but of you smiling. That dream keeps me alive." In 1919, after losing her husband, Pierre, Marie Curie wrote in her diary, "In my dreams, he walks beside me. I wake weeping, but I rise with courage. Love does not vanish, it transforms." These words reveal how hope often comes disguised as memory, love, or imagination. The unconscious preserves sparks for us. Even when waking life feels barren, the cinematic vision of hope picture, a vast battlefield at night, smoke rising, silence heavy with loss. The camera pans across broken weapons, scattered helmets, bodies lying still, and then, in the corner of the screen, a single flower pushes up through the mud. A soldier notices, bends down, and touches its petals. The music swells. That flower is hope. Small, almost invisible, yet unstoppable. This is how dreams reveal hope, delicate but resilient. The spark in philosophers have often written of hope as the quietest, yet most necessary, virtue. Aristotle called it a waking dream. Kierkegaard saw it as the antidote to despair. The possibility of the good is what gives life meaning. Gabriel Marcel described hope as memory of the future, a mysterious trust that tomorrow holds possibility. For Jung, hope is not optimism. Optimism can be shallow, a denial of darkness. True hope is deeper. It is born within the darkness itself, as its counterbalance. Dreams of renewal. Jung's patients often reported dreams of small but radiant images: a candle, a bird, a child, a seed. He interpreted these as symbols of renewal, the psyche's way of pointing toward growth, healing, and rebirth. For example, a man grieving the death of his wife dreamed of planting a sapling that grew quickly into a tree. A woman trapped in an abusive marriage dreamed of a bird flying through an open window. A soldier haunted by nightmares of war finally dreamed of sunrise over a peaceful field. These were not coincidences. They were sparks, moments when the unconscious spoke of hope long before the conscious mind could believe it. The spark in collective struggle. Entire peoples have been sustained by sparks of hope. African American spirituals, sung in fields of bondage, carried coded messages of freedom, hope disguised as song. During the siege of Sarajevo, musicians played violins in bombed-out streets, their music a spark that declared, "We are still alive." In Warsaw, during Nazi occupation, citizens secretly taught children to read because teaching hope is rebellion. Hope is not weakness. It is defiance. It is the soul's refusal to surrender. A personal mirror. Think of a time when you were most lost, most burdened. Perhaps you thought there was no way forward, and yet somewhere, somehow a spark appeared. Maybe it was a kind word, a smile, a memory, a dream. That spark carried you. It did not remove the weight, but it lit a path beneath it. This is the unconscious at work, giving you what you need to endure. The archetype of the child. Jung identified the divine child archetype as one of the most powerful symbols of hope. In dreams, the child often appears in moments of despair, representing new beginnings, innocence, and possibility. Christ was born in a stable during Roman oppression. Krishna was born under threat of death. Horus was born in hiding after Osiris was slain. The child emerges when the world is darkest. Hope incarnate. In dreams, to see a child is to glimpse the possibility of new life, even when all seems lost. Closing the chapter, and so we find ourselves in the presence of the spark of hope, the small flame that flickers against overwhelming night. It is fragile, yes, but it is also eternal. Dreams bring us this spark, not to deny our pain, but to remind us that despair is never the whole story. History testifies. Philosophy confirms. The unconscious whispers, "Do not despise the small light. It is enough." For in every spark lies the fire that can remake the world. Perfect. Now that we've seen the spark of hope, the flame begins to grow stronger. In Chapter 6, hope transforms into resilience, the fire that carries us through suffering toward renewal. Chapter 4, the cry for freedom. The world can press so heavily upon the soul that silence becomes impossible. Out of sorrow, out of fragility, out of suffering, there comes a voice, a cry that pierces the heavens and echoes through the ages. This is the cry for freedom. It is the voice of the oppressed, the imprisoned, the silenced. It is also the voice of the unconscious, breaking into consciousness with dreams that shake us awake. Jung wrote that the unconscious is not only personal, it is collective. When an entire people are bound by chains, their dreams echo with archetypes of liberation, breaking out of prisons, climbing over walls, flying away from cages. These dreams are not fantasies. They are the unconscious, declaring, "You were not born to be broken. You were born to be free." The archetype of liberation freedom itself is an archetype. It appears in myths of the hero who escapes captivity, of the soul that breaks chains, of the bird that bursts from its cage and soars into the sky in dreams. This archetype takes many forms. A locked door suddenly opening, a prisoner slipping past guards, wings sprouting from the dreamer's back, a suffocating room breaking open into a vast landscape. These images are not random. They are the psyche's way of dramatizing our deepest hunger, the hunger to live without chains, to stand upright in dignity. Historical voices of the cry history is the echo chamber of freedom's cry. Spartacus, the gladiator who led a rebellion against Rome, is remembered not only for his battles, but for embodying the dream of liberation in every slave. Harriet Tubman, escaping slavery herself, dreamed of a land where her people could walk free, and then turned her dreams into reality by leading others through the Underground Railroad. Mahatma Gandhi stood barefoot before the British Empire and declared that freedom was not theirs to give, but humanity's birthright. Martin Luther King, Jr., in his dream, cried out not just for African Americans, but for the soul of humanity itself. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. These were not merely political figures, they were embodiments of the archetype of freedom. They spoke not just to their people, but to the unconscious yearning of all humankind. Dreams of prisoners during his imprisonment. Alexander Solzhenitsyn dreamed of wide fields, open skies, and rivers flowing unbound. In his writings, he confessed that these dreams were what kept him alive in the gulags. Nelson Mandela, too, dreamed of walking through the gates of Robben Island without guards at his back. Years later, when he finally did, he described it as if his dream had materialized in waking life. Dreams of freedom sustain the oppressed. They are not illusions, they are rehearsals for liberation. The cinematic vision of liberation picture, a scene on film, a cell door creaks open in the dead of night. The prisoner steps out, blinking into the darkness, heart pounding. He begins to run. The camera follows as he races through corridors, leaps over walls, crashes into the open air. Then, suddenly, the camera pans upward. He is flying, the prison. Below, shrinking until it disappears into clouds. This is the unconscious rendering freedom in its most vivid form. We do not merely leave chains behind, we ascend. Freedom in philosophy, the cry for freedom, has also shaped the great philosophers. Jean-Paul Sartre declared that man is condemned to be free, meaning that freedom is not only a gift but also a burden, for with it comes responsibility. John Stuart Mill argued that freedom of thought and expression is the foundation of human dignity. Hannah Arendt, reflecting on totalitarianism, wrote that to strip people of freedom is to strip them of their very humanity. These thinkers remind us that freedom is not merely physical. It is spiritual, intellectual, existential. Dreams, too, speak to all levels of freedom: body, mind, and soul. Letters that shaped freedom history remembers speeches and battles, but it also remembers letters written from the heart. In 1845, Frederick Douglass, once enslaved, wrote, "I prayed for freedom for 20 years, but received no answer until I prayed with my legs." In 1940, Winston Churchill wrote in a letter to his cabinet, "We shall not fail or falter. We shall not weaken or tire. Give us the tools and we will finish the job." These are cries for freedom inscribed in ink, fueled by the weight of suffering, given voice by the soul's refusal to remain silent. dreams as prophesying suggested. That dreams sometimes act as prophesied, not literal predictions, but glimpses of the soul's future trajectory. For oppressed peoples, dreams of freedom often precede liberation. It is as though the unconscious already knows what the conscious mind cannot yet believe, that chains will be broken, that walls will fall, that the cry will become reality. The cry and its tension. But the cry for freedom is not without tension. Every cry echoes against resistance. Every liberation stirs fear in those who cling to power. Dreams reflect this struggle too. Escape pursued by captors, flight interrupted by obstacles, wings torn by storm winds. These are not failures. They are reminders that freedom must be fought for, both outwardly in the world and inwardly in the psyche. The cry in the modern Sullivan today, in a world that calls itself free, the unconscious continues to cry out. For many are imprisoned not in cells, but in systems, in poverty, in prejudice, in invisible cages of the mind. Dreams of running, of flying, of breaking free, continue to surge in the collective unconscious. They remind us that freedom is never finished. It is a work of every generation. The archetype of the rebel in Jungian thought, the rebel is an archetype as ancient as myth. Prometheus defied the gods to bring fire to humanity. Moses defied Pharaoh to lead his people into liberation. Rosa Parks defied the bus driver to claim her dignity in dreams. The rebel archetype may appear as a figure urging you to resist, to speak, to break rules. Sometimes it is you yourself, standing up against unjust authority in the dream. This archetype signals the unconscious demanding liberation in some part of your waking life. Closing the chapter, and so, we arrive at the cry for freedom, the voice that rises from the weight of suffering and refuses silence. Dreams reflect this cry in chains breaking, in cages opening, in wings unfolding. History reflects it in the speeches of rebels, the letters of visionaries, the marches of the oppressed. Freedom is not a gift granted from above. It is a birthright claimed from within. The unconscious whispers, "You are more than your chains." You are the cry itself, the voice that will not be silenced, the dream that will not be caged. You were born to be free. Wonderful weave, descended through sorrow, fragility, and suffering. We've heard the cry for freedom. Now, in chapter 5, the first faint spark of hope begins to glow in the darkness. The archetype of the burden. Jung spoke often of archetypes in suffering. One of the most universal is the burden bearer, the figure carrying a heavy load, climbing a steep hill, dragging chains behind them. In dreams, this archetype appears as carrying stones, pushing carts, or walking with great difficulty. It is the psyche's way of telling us, you are carrying something. You cannot run from it. You must endure it, and in enduring you will grow. From Christ bearing the cross, to Sisyphus pushing his boulder, to countless folk tales of travelers with heavy packs, the weight of suffering is depicted not as meaningless, but as transformative. Philosophers in the fire suffering has shaped the minds of philosophers as much as it has shaped the hearts of heroes. Epictetus, the Stoic, was born a slave, beaten by his master until his leg was crippled. Yet he declared, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it, that matters." Nietzsche, racked with illness and pain, transformed his suffering into philosophy, proclaiming, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." Simone, while who starved herself in solidarity with the poor during World War II, wrote, "The extreme greatness of Christianity lies in the fact that it does not seek a supernatural remedy for suffering, but a supernatural use for it." Each of them listened to the unconscious in the midst of suffering, and what they heard was not despair, but the possibility of transcendence. Letters of Suffering History is written not only in victories, but in the private letters of those who bore the heaviest loads. In 1851, Florence Nightingale, tending the wounded in Crimea, wrote, "Every man here is a ruin. The weight of their pain seeps into my dreams. I dream of blood that cannot be washed away. Yet in that dream I hear a voice, stay, endure, and heal." In 1963, from a Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr. penned his famous letter, writing, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The cup of endurance runs over." These words are not abstract. They are testimony that the weight of suffering does not merely crush, it teaches. It calls, it awakens. The cinematic language of suffering. Imagine a scene on film. A man trudges through snow, his breath ragged, his body bent beneath a wooden beam strapped to his back. Around him, the world is grey, barren, merciless. Every step seems impossible, yet he continues. The camera zooms in on his face, size filled not only with pain, but with a strange fire, a flicker of will that refuses to die. This is the visual of suffering in dreams. It is brutal, yes, but also noble. It shows us that suffering is not meaningless. Struggle, it is sacred struggle. Dreams as consolation. Jung noticed that in the midst of the heaviest suffering, dreams often bring unexpected symbols of consolation. A patient grieving a lost child might dream of holding a glowing star. A soldier tormented by war might dream of a bird perched on his shoulder, singing. The unconscious knows the weight is unbearable, and so it offers symbols of endurance, images that remind us that life, however brutal, still contains sparks of hope. The weight of collective suffering. Not only individuals suffer, nations, peoples, entire generations bear burdens. The Holocaust was humanity's darkest descent. Yet survivors' testimonies tell of dreams where dead relatives appeared, offering comfort, urging them to endure. During the Great Depression, people dreamed of endless feasts, of tables filled with bread and fruta, symbolic compensation for hunger. After 9/11s, many New Yorkers reported dreams of collapsing towers, of running from smoke, of holding strangers' hands in the dark. The unconscious does not ignore collective suffering. It mirrors it, processes it, and sometimes even heals it through shared dreams. The wisdom of endurance. Suffering teaches endurance. Endurance teaches humility. Humility opens the door to wisdom. Jung himself endured his own inner suffering during his break with Freud. He fell into a crisis so deep he feared madness. In his Red Book, he recorded visions of blood, serpents, dead children, apocalyptic landscapes. Yet out of that inner torment came his greatest insights, the theory of archetypes, the collective unconscious, the process of individuation. His suffering became his philosophy. His weight became his wisdom. A mirror for the listener. Think now of your own life. What is the greatest weight you have carried? Perhaps it was grief, perhaps betrayal, perhaps the silent loneliness of being misunderstood. Recall how it felt, the heaviness in your chest, the exhaustion in your bones, and then ask, did it not change you? Did it not carve something deeper into your soul, something that could not have been formed without that weight? Dreams mirror this truth. They do not hide suffering from us. They dramatize it, amplify it, so that we may finally face it and grow. The archetype of transformation. Through suffering, Jung identified another archetype tied to suffering, the wounded healer. In myth, it is Chiron, The centaur wounded by a poisoned arrow who could never heal himself, yet healed others. In history, it is every doctor, nurse, or leader who, scarred by suffering, transforms that wound into compassion for others. In dreams, this archetype appears when we ourselves are wounded but still reach out to heal another. It is the unconscious, showing us that suffering, once embraced, can become service, beautiful now. We step from the weight of suffering into the fiery cry that erupts from the human spirit. When endurance alone is no longer enough, the demand for dignity, justice, and liberation. Chapter 1: Emotional Beginnings. The silence of night is unlike any other silence. It is heavy, vast, infinite, a canvas stretched across the sky upon which the human soul projects its hidden stories. When the world grows still, when footsteps fade and lamps flicker out, something awakens inside us. This awakening is not the awakening of the body, but of the unconscious. The veiled twin of our waking mind. Carl Jung, the great interpreter of the psyche, often described this realm as a second universe within USA, living, breathing cosmos of symbols, archetypes, and forgotten truths. He said that when we dream, the unconscious is not simply entertaining us with fragmented illusions. It is speaking, it is telling us stories that are both deeply personal and infinitely universal. But to understand the unconscious, one must begin not with light, but with shadow. All profound journeys, whether in life, philosophy, or history, begin in sorrow, in doubt, in the cry that erupts from the heart when meaning collapses and the soul aches for direction. And so, our story begins here, in the raw universality of pain, the descent into human loneliness, sitting alone in Turin 1889, when the weight of existence finally broke him. He had spoken of the abyss, of staring into it until it stares back, and in his final descent, his own abyss swallowed him. He collapsed in tears, embracing a beaten horse on the street, unable to bear the cruelty of life any longer. Tragedy is not merely a story of madness. It is a mirror of our own unspoken moments. Who among us has not felt the horse whipped within us, the innocence, beaten by a world too harsh, too indifferent? Nietzsche's sorrow is our sorrow, the longing for compassion in a world that does not always give it. Loneliness is the soil from which Jung's dream psychology grows. For it is in our solitude, in the nights when we lie awake staring at the ceiling, that the unconscious begins to whisper. The archetype of sorrow. Jung believed that sorrow itself is an archetype, a universal pattern that binds all human beings. Across cultures, across centuries, stories begin with exile, with separation, with grief. Adam and Eve cast out of Eden, the Buddha leaving his palace, shaken by the sight of sickness and death. Dante lost in the dark wood of his life, unsure of the way forward. These beginnings echo because they belong to all of us. In every human story, there is the moment when the heart breaks, when the illusion of safety dissolves, and we are forced into confrontation with the unknown. Dreams often replay this archetype. You find yourself wandering an empty city, searching for someone you love but cannot find. You hear voices calling your name, but the faces are blurred. You are falling, endlessly, into darkness. These are not random nightmares, they are dramatizations of the human condition, symbols of our shared exile from certainty. Letters from the Abyssine 1915. Amidst the blood and smoke of World War I, soldiers wrote letters home that trembled with despair. I dream, one wrote, of a world where I can see my mother's face again, but in my dreams she does not recognize me. Another wrote, the trenches are endless, but in sleep I walk fields of flowers that vanish when I reach them. These letters, fragile scraps of paper soaked with mud and tears, are testimonies of the unconscious. Even in hell, the psyche speaks. It shows us both what we lack and what we hope for. Jung, working as a psychiatrist in Switzerland during those same years, collected such dream fragments from his patients. He noticed something uncanny. Soldiers, civilians, and even children in faraway lands were dreaming the same dreams, visions of floods, of collapsing towers, of blood in the streets. The unconscious, he realized, was not just personal, it was collective. It belonged to all of us, and it spoke in a shared language of symbols. The universality of pain. Pause for a moment. Think of the child crying quietly in a small village because she misses her father who has gone away to find work. Think of the widow in an ancient Roman house, clutching her husband's cloak after the Battle of Cannae. Think of the young man in today's world scrolling through his phone at midnight, feeling the cold absence of love in a world crowded with faces. All of them are connected. Their loneliness is a single thread woven through the human tapestry. And when they dream, their dreams echo each other. This is why Jung insisted that dreams are not trivial. They are bridges between the personal and the universal, between our small private sorrows and the great ocean of humanity. The first descent in history itself mirrors the journey of the unconscious. Civilizations, like individuals, begin in fragility and longing. Ancient Mesopotamian epics are filled with lamentations of kings begging the gods for meaning. The Greeks built tragedies that opened with suffering Oedipus blinded Antigone. Condemned, Prometheus chained. Why? Because human beings instinctively understand that the beginning of wisdom is pain. Before there is resilience, before there is triumph, there must be the wound. Dreams follow the same path. They take us first into the wound, into the broken places we do not want to look. They strip away the masks of the day and confront us with our rawest fears. Cinematic interlude. Imagine this as a film. The screen is black. Slowly, a single candle flickers into view, casting trembling shadows on a stone wall. You hear a voice, not from outside, but from within your chest. It says, "You are not alone in your loneliness. Every tear you shed is a river that others have crossed." The camera pans across faces from every era, every land. A mother in 15th century China, a freedom fighter in 20th century Africa, a poet in 19th century Russia. Their eyes all carry the same glimmer, sorrow, and the hunger for meaning. The candle burns lower. The shadows grow taller. The voice continues. This is the beginning. Not of joy, not of triumph, but of the journey into yourself. From pain to depth. Jung argued that without acknowledging sorrow, the unconscious remains sealed. Pain is the key that unlocks the dream world. It forces us to look beyond the surface of life. He often compared it to alchemy, the ancient art of turning lead into gold. In alchemy, the first stage is called nigredo, the blackening, the breaking down of the old self. Only after the darkness can transformation begin. And so, in life, the nigredo is our sorrow, our loneliness, our nights of despair. In dreams, it appears as death, as chaos, as loss. But Jung teaches us not to run, to listen, to let the unconscious speak its truth. The emotional weight of beginnings. Every great figure of history carried this weight. Abraham Lincoln, before becoming a symbol of resilience, wrote letters confessing to friends that he felt the most miserable man alive, consumed by melancholy. Mahatma Gandhi, before leading India to freedom. Confessed in his autobiography the nights he lay awake, trembling with self-doubt. Marie Curie, before discovering radium, endured poverty, hunger, and the loss of her beloved husband, wandering through grief. Their beginnings were not triumphant. They were fragile, broken, and uncertain. Yet in those very nights of despair, the seeds of greatness were planted. Dreams mirror this arc. They begin in shadow. In the emotional chaos that prepares the soil for growth, the symbol of the descent Jung often pointed to myths of descent as dream symbols. Orpheus descending into the underworld, Inanna descending to face the Queen of Death, Christ descending into hell before resurrection. Descent is not failure, is initiation. The unconscious speaks first through descent, because it knows the soul must be broken open before it can expand. And so, the first chapter of our journey must linger here, in the descent, in the emotional beginnings where sorrow is raw and unresolved, perfect. Let's step deeper into the philosophical and emotional journey. Now I'll unfold Chapter 2, The Fragility of Existence.